Hello and welcome to Tuesday Talks. My guest today is Gary Albert, artist, entrepreneur, local business owner. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you.
We are delighted to have you on Tuesday Talks with us this week, and I'm very happy that you are joining us again this week. Gary has been in this area for a long time, and in fact, I think was pretty much raised in this area. Were you, Gary?
Yeah, raised in Harbor Springs, went to high school there, and then to Michigan State for college with a theater degree and in performance.
Okay.
And telecommunication and art history minors.
Okay. So growing up here as a youngster was just a pretty neat way to live, wasn't it?
I can't think of anywhere else that I'd rather grow up. It's such a beautiful area, almost ethereal in some ways because
Right.
there was just so much to do, and even then, before I left here, I was able to stick my feet in the performing waters of the Little Traverse Civic Theater.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Did you start in theater at a young age?
Relatively speaking, I probably started a little late, relative to
Right.
kids in an urban setting where they're like,
Exactly. 3 years old.
being a Von Trapp,
Right. Right,
child.
exactly.
But, so junior high,
Mhm.
right, was the first,
Mhm.
actually 5th grade was the first, but junior high pretty seriously, and then high school, during which time I also performed and did tech with the Little Traverse Civic Theater.
Interesting. So you kind of had on both sides of the stage, if you will. But then that really led you, as you just said, to getting your bachelor's degree in theater and in performance. And from there, from Michigan State, you went directly to Chicago, didn't you?
Directly to Chicago.
The big city.
I know. I can actually say that I have. I disappointed a producer who wanted me to come do dinner theater right after college, and then 2 weeks beforehand, someone called me from Chicago. I had a job and an apartment, and I said, you know what, I have to do this.
Yeah, how fabulous is that?
Right.
Yeah.
So I gathered all my stuff up and moved to Chicago. And yeah.
That was a short stint of maybe 18 years.
Yeah, short. But it was the perfect amount of time.
And during that time, I'm sure you did a lot of different things in terms of theater and maybe even some non-theater stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was amazing what my theater arts degree allowed me to do during that time, even though I was an actor who was temping a lot during the day. But I have to say, the theater that I did, I thoroughly enjoyed doing. I loved auditioning. And some of the theater that I did actually has stayed with me over the years, and we can touch on that, the Christmas Schooner. Yeah. And I was able, when I decided to come back, I was able to bring a lot of that experience and expertise back with me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So having been raised here, I would assume that you still had a lot of family ties here, and was that the draw then that brought you back up to northern Michigan?
Yeah, it was the desire to get back to my roots, as it were. Even though I was born in Detroit, moved up here very young, the age of 7. And then there was the family. I had a niece who was 9 years old. And my parents were, getting older, but they weren't by any means old at that point.
Right.
But it was just the perfect time. I was about to turn 40, and
Sure.
Just thought, well, what a great way to write the next chapter of my life.
Exactly. And you've been up here now, back again, another 18
years.
20 or something like
Yeah.
that, right? Did you, and by the way, Gary is the owner of the pet shop in Petoskey, Rough Life. So how did that come about, and when did you decide that was a good direction for you and you ventured into a pet shop?
Well, speaking of chapters, you know, in that regard, I had a few jobs since I moved back. And it just came to a point, I was working for a communications company up here, and at a certain point I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be, you know, 50
Right.
in another year or so, and I have to rewrite the next chapter. And so I had some money put away, and I thought, I wanna do this, now is the time. I'd thought of it since I'd moved back. Actually, I thought that the seed was planted in Chicago, where I had a dog down in Chicago.
I was just gonna ask you,
Yeah.
did you have a pet when you were in Chicago?
Yeah,
You
we did.
That's
And we moved up, or I moved, yeah, he and I moved back in 2002. And I always thought, oh, wouldn't it be great to do this? Wouldn't it be great to do that? But, you know, the stars didn't align.
That's a big step.
Yeah. So at which point in 2012, it was time, it was January, it was perfect timing. I found the greatest location, 309 Howard Street. And
Yes.
and I,
It is a great location.
it is a great location.
The foot traffic is,
The foot traffic in the park right there,
Yeah.
perfect. So I've just loved every minute of
having
you know,
your shop.
of having my own shop and
Yeah.
and the growing pains that come along with that.
Sure, but you have, you touch so many different people in so many important ways because you know how much we all love our pets, right?
Right.
And so you get to see and visit with everybody else and their pets, plus you get to have yours there.
With
and
me every
I
day.
know how passionate you are about dogs.
Mhm. I love. I mean, they're my favorite people.
Yeah. I kind of agree.
Yeah.
I'm very much a dog person too. So all along the way, since you have been back for these 18 years or so, you have lent your skill, your experience, your expertise to the community in terms of your theater and performance background, and I know that you've been so active with the Little Traverse Civic Theater.
Correct.
And you've also been very active with us, with Great Lakes Chamber Orchestra.
Yeah, I'm proud of that.
Yeah, and we're just thrilled. And I can't tell you, it's okay, great. We're doing something, we need Gary. And we pick up the phone and call Gary, and he says, yep, I can lend my voice for that. And so we appreciate that very much. You have, how many productions have you been involved in with Little Traverse Civic Theater?
Oh, wow.
Can't count, huh?
I have probably at least 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know that you sing, and you have sung rather, in the Great Lakes Chamber Orchestra chorus.
Correct.
Number of years, number of Messiahs and Mozarts and Beethovens or whatever the orchestra is doing. And but in a special way, you do lend your voice, and you have for, well, most recently, Mask of the Red Death,
Yeah.
which was our last October concert. Tell us a little bit about that. How was that?
That was very interesting. And Libor, Andres, your conductor
Yeah.
and artistic director,
Yeah, right?
you know, we've known each other now at least for
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah. he's
5
been
years
here
now,
5
yeah.
years.
And having done the Harry Potter narration the year before, and then the first year, I think,
Lemony Snicket. Yeah.
the Lemony Snicket
Yeah.
was probably my absolute favorite thing to do. As a matter of
Okay.
fact, I've even remarked to him that if he ever, you know, conducted that in Europe, I'd be more than happy to fly over and do that
Now,
again.
what made that your favorite?
It was, it was just fun. I could do. It was fun because I was like a musical instrument in that show, because the narration follows along with the music. So when I was presented with the script, I was like, well, do you mind if I have a copy of the score?
Right.
And because I can't read music, it was very easy for me to then slip those parts into the right parts. So so I didn't have to rely on Libor necessarily, and he felt confident that I was going to
come in at the right spot.
Exactly.
Right? Kind of like Benjamin Britten Guide to the Orchestra.
Right.
You know, that it just is interspersed with the music continually.
Or even Peter and the Wolf. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Peter and the Wolf.
And so as Libor and I have gotten to know each other and each other's talent, I suppose, and abilities, I think that, it would be nice to think that, oh, let's do this and let's ask Gary. Let's do Harry Potter and let's ask Gary. Let's do Mask of Red Death. Let's ask Gary. That really means a lot to me, right? And let me say too that, my introduction to the GLCO, I couldn't, it didn't just happen. About a year or two after I moved here, I was approached by Peter Sims, and he's the former chorus master.
Correct, yeah.
And I became a section leader at the First Presbyterian Church in Harbor Springs for him. And I did that for about 12 years, getting up every Sunday morning, where I would be.
I have done that for a lot of years.
So much prefer to be in bed than home and sleeping in, but I got to become better at what I do, both chorally and as a solo artist, and he brought me into the GLCO fold. And so I have to give a lot of credit to him for bringing me in.
Yeah, well, and it's an interesting. It is interesting. It's certainly theater, if you will. It's certainly performing, but it's different than the Schooner or something.
Exactly. So Mask of Red Death that was probably the most challenging for me.
It was quite theatrical.
Yeah, and Libor wanted me in 4 different places in the auditorium at the new Great Lakes Center for the Performing Arts.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, all right, I think I can do this, And he relied a lot on me to create the character of the narrator, but also become an omnipresent face of that evil, if you will.
With no face.
No face, no.
You had no face, and it was very, very moving and very impactful. The lighting, the cloak you wore,
the dancers,
the dancers, of course, Crooked Tree, how wonderful they were. But the script was well written. I mean, it was there, and it really characterized everything that was going on.
Yeah.
But you had to know how to read that and interpret that.
Exactly, because it could be dry.
Yeah.
It could be, very dry. But just as the dancers were interpreting it in a theatrical way, it let me interpret it in my theatrical way, and I think that's what Libor was looking for.
Right. And then, of course, there was Harry Potter. How much fun was that?
Oh my God.
We were all in a costume. I was in costume. Libor was in costume. You were
I
in
was
costume.
in costume.
And that was the largest attendance of kids we ever had. Over 130 kids attended that concert, so it was wonderful.
And that was so exciting because I don't recall rehearsing all that much. I think we rehearsed that morning. I rehearsed that morning with the orchestra, and just hearing that music coming out of our orchestra so well,
not easy music to play.
Not easy music to play, and exciting music to play when you hear it. That was very exciting.
Yeah, pop's music usually it requires a larger orchestra, as you know, and lots of percussion and brass and all of that. So it's not necessarily something a chamber orchestra does all the time, but we certainly like to do that, especially for our young people's concerts, and it is exciting music, I think it is. So you just touched on something, Gary, feeling the music, being part of the performance, being part of the music. Here we are, still very COVID-19,
Right.
very masked, very closed, if you will. The Great Lakes Center for the Arts is open, but on a very limited basis.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts? Do you want to share where we are in, not only in the world, but this is our community, and we're just a vibrant arts community.
Right. And, you know, it's, for a while there I thought, oh, well, do we have to take our lead from New York
Right.
when it comes to
We are
attendance?
here. Yeah.
You know, we're here in a more rural area.
Numbers aren't so
However,
high.
numbers aren't so high, but, you know, New York relies on putting butts in seats, you know, and they don't have a problem with that. But they have a problem with that when, you know, you have a show like Wicked that costs so much to produce and maintain, that you have to have those people in seats.
Right.
You know, I read and heard recently that there's even talk of the Broadway theater not coming back until 2022. Now, whether that happens or not, I don't know, because the COVID is such a
Yeah, it's a fluid thing.
it's a fluid situation, so we don't know. But I think what is important for small arts organizations who want to continue and persevere and maintain is convincing patrons and donors that we're still here, we still need support,
Right.
you know, financial and otherwise.
Right.
Because if we can only fill a quarter of that theater,
That's right.
then where's that excess coming from?
Exactly.
And it's coming from the benefactors,
Right.
right?
Right.
The community foundations, that, you know, hopefully, knock wood, that our large donors continue to do well in their businesses, that we don't get overlooked.
Investments. And,
Yeah. That we don't get overlooked, and that,
Exactly.
you know, we still have some sort of presence, right? Which, you know, you find a lot of performers, and when I talk about Broadway in New York, for
Yeah.
instance, I'm not talking about just the theater, I'm talking about the Lincoln Center, and
Yeah,
the Met,
the Met,
and the New York
yeah.
City Opera,
Right. The ballet.
the
New York City
ballet, and the Joffrey, and all
Yeah.
those, and how, you know, they're donor supported as well as subscriber supported and
Right.
patron supported. That, you know, we have to work 3 to 10 times as hard, you know, to get that support
Right.
for
right.
our organizations here.
You know, I think the one thing that I hope people realize is that we have a lot of very strong and good arts organizations here in our area. Crooked Tree, Little Traverse Civic Theater, Great Lakes Chamber Orchestra. We're very strong, we're good, we will weather this, we will be here. And I think I know on an intrinsic level, we all know how important the arts is.
So this is very interesting, and if I could just touch on Harry Potter for a minute, you know, especially during COVID, but generally speaking on cable television, you can usually hit a month or a week when they're doing a Harry Potter marathon, a Twilight marathon,
Exactly.
a Marvel marathon,
Right.
a Hunger Games marathon.
Right.
And the last one was last week. It was a Harry Potter, and in between, you know, during the commercials,
Sure.
what they did was they had members of Phoenix Symphony Orchestra, Phoenix, very Harry Potter, and
Yeah.
they had all of the musicians on Zoom. Well, not all of the musicians, but a certain
Right.
amount, playing the score or pieces of the score for Harry Potter, and it was like, wow, that's very interesting. That's cool to watch,
Right.
and I got to see a little bit of and hear,
Right.
this being played for all intents and purposes live.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so Broadway artists, musicians, singers, who are musicians,
Yes.
and we forget that having vocalists who are musicians who have been trained as such, just like our colleagues who play instruments, and continue to practice in any way that
Exactly.
right, I think deserve the same amount of respect and support as the musicians get it. That these people are finding ways to perform,
Right. Right.
and that's on YouTube, and that's
And I think,
on Zoom,
yes,
and Seth
yes.
Rudetsky has his artist in the house
Right.
every evening.
Exactly. and I think that we know that so many of the performing arts organizations, whether they're orchestras or theaters or whatever, have developed a very robust online program or programs. And Gary, I think that's going to be here to stay, because we can reach with our online programming, we can reach people who are out of town, people who might be sick, or people who can't make a performance. So we are all learning to juggle that whole online technology type
Right.
approach to a live performance. When the curtain rises, we will be there, and we all are looking forward to that and feeling that music in our chest. But for now, we can reach people, audiences, and we're delighted to be able to reach everybody, all of you out there, through the online programs that the orchestra has developed, including Little Bay concerts, GLCO in concert, and of course our Tuesday Talk program. So I'm delighted once again that you have joined us this week in our little chat together, Gary and I. Thank you, Gary, very much
You're very welcome. Thanks for asking me to come.
for being part of this, and thank you for being part of the orchestra in many ways.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.
Totally.
Thank you all again for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next week.